Hey, Bear Scan with the Eugene Science Center, and today we're going to be showing you how to make your very own pH indicator at home to detect whether or not you've got an acid or a base. But before we show you how to do that, I do want to talk a little bit about what is an indicator in science, what does pH stand for, and what are acids and bases. So the first thing I want to talk about is what is an indicator. Well, an indicator in science is anything that you can add to a solution that will have some sort of chemical reaction happen that's visible. And usually that is a change of color. So with our pH indicator, it will have a range of colors that it can change to based on what the acidity or basicness of our solution is. Now, most science indicators have a large spectrum of pHs and colors that they can appear as. Today, we're going to be making a very simple version of that. So it's not going to have the full spectrum of the rainbow, but it will have some color change in it. The next thing is, what in the world is pH? So pH in simple terms is a measure of how acidic a substance is. And there's typically a scale, a number scale. And it typically runs from 0 to 14. 0 being the most acidic, and 14 being the most basic. Right there in the middle is a 7. That's what we're going to have as a neutral. So those are things that are not acidic and they're not basic. So along with being on the low end of the pH scale, our acids are proton donors. They make hydrogen ions in solution. And these are just free-range protons that are floating around trying to bond with any other chemical they can possibly do that with that would be willing to accept them. Now, the ones that do want to accept them are our bases, our alkalines. And these are looking for any amount of free protons they can to add to their chemical structure and bond with those. So, acids are hydrogen ion creators, and bases are hydrogen ion stealers. And now that we've covered all of our bases, it's time to get into our indicator. All right, so now it's time for us to make our indicator. So what you're gonna need is a red cabbage and some kind of food processor or blender. If you don't have one of those at home, putting it in a plastic bag and beating it with a rolling pin should work just as well. So I'm putting in about 1/8 of a red cabbage here. However, you really don't need this much. This is going to make an enormous amount of indicator all on its own. And you're also going to need to throw in some water because we're going to be taking out those juices from the red cabbage. And we need a little bit of dilution. So we're going to put some water in there to pick up all those pigments. All right. So the pigment is trapped inside of the cell wall of the cabbage. And what the blades are doing inside the food processor is it's ripping open the cells and letting those pigments flow into the water. So now that it's all mashed up, we're going to need to separate the juices with the indicator in it from the solids that remain. So we're going to be using a funnel with a coffee filter in it. With just any type of glass jar at the bottom will do just fine. And we're going to filter off all of those solids because we do not need them for our indicator to work. All right. So it's going to need to drain off for just a second here. And while it doesn't look like there's a lot here, even a small amount of this indicator can tell you whether or not something is going to be an acid or a base. We're going to actually just be using a little dropper full for our experiments. And that's going to be more than enough for all the experiments that we're going to need to do today. All right, so we've got our red cabbage indicator, and it's time for us to test it on our acids and our bases. So we're gonna test it on one of those common household acids. It's distilled white vinegar. And if this is in fact an acid, it will turn from a purple to a pink. So let's find out. And yes, indeed, it turns from that deep purple to that very bright pink. Excellent. Now we have one of the most common household bases, and this is baking soda. So instead of putting it all in this container, I'm going to take a little bit of this powder out, put it in my tray, and now I'm going to squirt a little bit of our pH indicator onto the baking soda, and it will turn a beautiful blue. Now, with red cabbage juice, blue is always going to be base, and pink is always going to be an acid. If it stays kind of purplish, that's usually an indication that it's neutral, right around what water would be. All right, now we've got some slightly less common things that you may or may not know if they're an acid or a base. We have some vitamin C, and this is also a powder. So I'm going to take my scoopula over here and take a little bit of it out. Now, vitamin C is something that's really good for you. It helps prevent scurvy, and it's said to help with preventing cold and flu. But let's see if it's an acid or a base. Ooh, turning that beautiful bright pink. So we do have, in fact, an acid here. And that's not a big surprise because vitamin C, its other name in science is ascorbic acid. So it is in fact an acid. Now we're moving on to milk. We got 2% milk over here from the cow itself. Let's see what we've got. Now it's going to be a little bit difficult to say at the beginning because the milk does have a color, but you may notice that it's turning kind of pinkish. It's not a strong pink. It's really more like a light lavender. But milk is, in fact, a very, very mild acid, a very weak acid. So it is going to be more on the pinkish purple side. Now we've got coconut milk. Coconut milk doesn't come from the cow, so let's see if it's different. So we're going to take some of our pH indicator, squeeze it in, and then give it a little bit of a stir. And you'll notice it is turning blue. And we can definitely compare it. This is the coconut milk blue, and here's the regular milk pink. So it does matter. Lots of cool, exciting things. Feel free to make your own pH indicator out of red cabbages at home and try it on lots of different things that you have and figure out what in your household is an acid and what in your household is a base. Hope you have fun trying it at home. Bye-bye.